Welcome back. These days it's hard not to be focused on the here and now. People worried about the housing market, the job market, stocks, gold, oil, silver, you name it. The key is what's yet to come and how can you invest and plan to prepare for the future. Here now with some advice, we welcome back our good friend Mitch Slater, Senior Vice President of Investments at UBS. Good to see you, Mitch.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, Mitch, we've got a lot to talk about today.
Okay.
First, we're going to talk about the wealth management team over at UBS. They have this new, it's a book. Called The Decade Ahead. Talk about that a little bit.
It's the trends. It's, you know, we're into a new decade as of January this year, and we're kind of looking at the trends over the next decade versus the previous decade. If you go back 10 years ago, there wasn't anybody Skyping. Google was just starting out.
What's that?
And if you think about the difference in technology and just having surgeries today using robotics versus 10 years ago, things are changing rapidly. So we decided, as a firm, UBS has decided to get the best minds together in all different areas and look at those trends over the next 10 years and see how that might fit into your investment portfolio.
All right, so let's jump right into it. Fossil fuels. All the talks right now about oil and gas and what are we going to do? Are we going to go more fuel efficient? Are we going to go for alternative forms of energy more than we are now? What's going to happen?
Well, absolutely. I think over the next 10 years you're going to see more of a reliance to these fossil fuels, you know, whether it's natural gas, whether it's coal. You're going to see that replacing oil in many situations and many businesses starting to look more and more. I heard you talk about solar. Solar is just going to consistently be more and more. I'm on the Board of Education in my town right now. We're trying to put solar on all our roofs, save a lot of money.
And right now, you could still get some money back from the government for doing it, correct?
Yes, you can. There still are some really good tax
Not as much
benefits.
as there was before.
Right. But from an investment portfolio, natural gas is an area you're going to want to keep some money in the next 10 years.
Technology going forward. And this is something that changes by the minute.
Absolutely. And when it comes to technology, we're looking at kind of two different areas. One is the infrastructure area is getting a little risky out there with cyber attacks. You've got the electric grids all of a sudden, the possibilities of these electromagnetic pulses or the EMPs. And when these things happen, whether it's through a solar flare one way or another, they can cause tremendous havoc. It's not like shutting a business down for a few hours. It's putting somebody out of business completely. And there are a lot of companies that are developing software and developing technology in that area. So that's a trend that I think you need to look at, not just the straight technology.
Or in the case of Sony, recently with the PlayStation Network, all of those customers and all of that personal information, it's incredible.
It is, and it's happening every day with big companies like Sony.
Healthcare. Let's talk healthcare because this is something else. Listen, my father-in-law is a doctor, and he's talking about the changes in the healthcare industry and how they've been impacting him. And some of the ways are okay, other ways not so good.
Well, the big difference, speaking of your father-in-law, is that we're going to have fewer and fewer physicians as we have this aging population. So suddenly, you might be dealing just with a physician's assistant. You might not actually get to see that doctor unless you get a referral. So that's one area that I think the aging population is big. And then, obviously, the human genome. I mean, we've been hearing about this for 15, 20 years. Well, we're there. And you now have the ability to start mapping your genetic code. And you're going to see physicians actually using that and different breakthroughs that are going on every day in stem cell technology. Look for a lot of that over the next 10 years, and there are a lot of very interesting companies in that space.
A lot of good investment opportunities in there. All right, so let's talk, you and I were just talking about inflation. And we were talking about interest rates also, and how right now, you're just not really making anything.
No, you're not.
And inflation has been under control for quite some time now. There was a risk of deflation for a while. There's a little bit of talk about, because gas, food prices have been going up, you've been hearing that inflation is starting to creep back into our lives again. We've been feeling it at the pump and in the grocery store, but what about going forward?
Well, we are feeling it, obviously, and you're talking about $4 gas here. I mean, you know, we are feeling it, but inflation, we're looking at somewhere in the projection of 5% a year over the next 10 years versus this 2 to 3%. And we don't think it's going to be the stagflation where the economy is really weak and interest rates are going up. It's probably going to be some sort of growth in the economy as well, but inflation is going to be there, and you're going to have to start investing in different types of alternatives, commodities, and really prepare against that, and especially hard assets. So inflation is back.
All right, well, let's talk about geopolitical risks, because We've been seeing this so much right now.
Yeah.
All the turmoil in the Middle East, governments being toppled, other factors out there where government debt has become such an issue overseas, and it's really impacted what's going on Wall Street, and it's raised a lot of concerns and fears in our own economy.
Well, absolutely, and it's sort of the great wild card that always exists, and the nuclear capabilities of many, many countries still exist, and some countries, like North Korea, just don't necessarily want to listen. That risk is going to stay there. There's also the risk of these weaker economies starting to devalue their currency and their money, and what's that going to do to our dollar, and what's that going to happen as you're seeing all these breakthroughs in the Middle East with all these countries starting to embrace democracy. There's also the risk to the other side of that trade. And these oil-rich countries, you know, the strong ones get stronger, and that's what certainly has made Brazil so strong, as well as China and some of the obvious Middle Eastern choices. So it all comes down to, as I said, the big wild card, and now in this post-Bin Laden era terrorism, and what that will mean in the next 10 years. And I think as a part of any portfolio, you have to always realize you have those geopolitical risks, and they're going to exist.
It's hard to imagine what can happen further going forward with the dollar, because the dollar's just been getting pummeled.
Yeah, our feeling is that it will not, you know, we won't see much lower numbers from this level, but we're not seeing any great strength. And if one day in the next 10 years the Chinese say, time to sell, time to get rid of those U.S. treasuries, and that could happen, that's a big problem.
Mitch, it's good to see you again, as always.
Sure,
thank you.
Always.
And if you have any questions or comments about anything in today's interview, send them to me at itsyourmoney@news12.com. We'll be right back.